friends. Today we are talking about Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. So to start off, a very dear friend of mine gifted me this book, and for that I am grateful because I enjoyed it immensely. So this is not just the illustrated version, which there's illustrations throughout the book, not just on the cover, but it is also the author's preferred text. So if you are unfamiliar with that, that's when the author recompiles the book at a later time after the initial publication, and it is, well, their preferred version of the story. So that's always my favorite to read. So I'm very happy that that's the version that she gave me. So in terms of intended audience for this book, to compare it to American Gods, when I read that one, it was very clear that it was for adults. The language, the content, the themes, even the size of the book, it was all very directed towards adults. I wouldn't even necessarily have given it to a teenager. I would probably stick to maybe a sophomore in college or that area. Neverwhere is different because it's, unlike American Gods, is not as in your face with the themes and content and such. However, if one were to create a movie about the book and it were a word-for-word adaptation, it would actually warrant an R rating due to the language and the dark content of it. The darkness of this book is truly dark. It is macabre, it is Edgar Allan Poe-esque. However, even though that's the case and it gets incredibly gruesome at times, the way that it is written is very matter-of-fact, which is actually something that I enjoy about Neil's writing style in other books as well. But I'll get into all of that in a following section. One thing that's for certain is that this is an aggressively British book. Essentially, this story is very Alice in Wonderland, except that Alice is a Scottish investment analyst named Richard who lives in London and isn't really looking to change his boring life, and the two bad guys are pretty much the worst guys you could ever meet. The basic plot of it is not entirely unique, because it's the standard reluctant hero goes on a journey. The whole time Richard just wants to get back home, get back to his normal life, but through the process he gains new friends and new acquaintances, new abilities. He starts to see himself in a different way, and in the process he goes from being a liability to becoming one of the most important members of the team. So the basic plot of the story isn't new. Okay. But what makes this story beautiful is the details of it. So the way that the London below is described, the way that the characters they meet are described, the details that go into that, the factions of the underground, everything that adds to the experience of the reader that immerses us into it, that's where the beauty lies in this story. And of course, there are several plot twists throughout that make you put the book down and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe this has happened. Which is a true story, because there were several times I put the book down and texted my friend who gave it to me and said, oh my gosh, I can't believe this has happened. When the story begins, we are introduced to a very boring man with a very boring life, and yet somehow the way Neil writes this, you still enjoy that part of the story. Instead of just wanting to get past it, get through the exposition, which I have sometimes in books where I feel like, when will this part of it be over and we can get into the real thing? But in this way, you enjoy each step of the process. As I mentioned in my American Gods video, if you have seen that, the way that Neil Gaiman writes is as if he's not coming up with the story, but he just happened to be there and is taking extremely detailed notes through the whole process. One difference between the two stories, though, is that in this one, the tone is a lot more conversational. There's many more examples where the author, the storyteller, the narrator, takes a moment to explain to you in a slightly humorous way what's going on, sort of reading between the lines a bit, and that's fun and enjoyable in this story. One example of what I mean by feeling like the author is just an observer of events and not the one coming up with it is that when we have scenes where Mr. Vandemar is literally eating the heads off of rodents and we're hearing the crunch and seeing the slime come out of his mouth, gross things like that. My thought was not, ew, Neil, I can't believe you put that in the book. My thought was actually, oh my gosh, Mr. Vandemar is so disgusting. So that's what I'm trying to convey, where even when bad stuff happens, it's not, wow, this guy's imagination is whack. It's, I can't believe these things are going on. It's enormously detailed while at the same time being detached in a way. It's truly a fascinating intersection of writing style that juxtaposes itself, where we have both an immersive experience that makes you feel like you're traveling along with the characters and experiencing all of this, while at the same time the more obscene and grotesque goings on you still feel slightly distanced or detached from, which makes them easier to handle. One of the things I love about Neil as a writer is that he personifies pretty much everything. So the darkness is not just a state, it is a character, it's a force, it's something that can get to you, you know? London, both London above and London below, that's a character. It changes, it's fluid. This is more evident in his mythology books, but even in books such as these that are more fantasy instead of mythos, it still captures that same feeling. Having read mythology that connects to the real world in some way, like the Iliad and stories such as those, they always find a way to personify these things. So dawn, rumor, sleep, like those are characters. And Neil approaches them the same way. I'd like to take a brief moment to address the fact that I've been calling him Neil and not Neil Gaiman or Mr. Gaiman or Gaiman, because he's on Tumblr, so... And once somebody asked him if they were allowed to call him Neil in a paper, because you're not supposed to call somebody by their first name if they're not like really your friend, right? But he said that we were allowed to do so and that we were allowed to be his friend. So I've just sort of developed a way of talking about him that refers to him as Neil. I hope that's okay. Anyway, the way he writes is fun because it adds another level of physical experience to the story that the readers can relate to while they are reading it. He also has a stellar vocabulary. I think that another good way to illustrate his tone is to compare him for a moment to Tim Burton. So a lot of people get the stories by Neil Gaiman and Tim Burton confused because Neil wrote Coraline. That has nothing to do with Tim Burton, but because of the movie, a lot of people mix them up. One of the main differences between them is that in Tim Burton's stories, the darkness is not something to be feared. You know, so like Edward Scissorhands, he's actually a nice guy that was just created by a crazy dude. Jack Skellington, he didn't want to destroy Christmas, he was just misguided. And corpses have feelings, especially if you accidentally marry them. Neil, on the other hand, comes at things where the darkness is not your friend. The darkness will have you experience your worst nightmares, and the bad guy will show up and kill your puppy and slit your throat, and that fake mom is actually a spider who wants to kidnap you and sew buttons into your eyes. The darkness is not your friend. Now, they both explore the themes of things being not quite as they seem, and perhaps the people you grow to trust the normal population wouldn't come within a foot of. And they both explore the whole concept of the mundanity of life, and boring is not good. However, Neil Gaiman is very much on the side of the darkness is not your friend, it's something that you have to survive and push through, whereas Tim Burton is very comfortable in the darkness. He's saying that, hey, this is where we fit in. So that's just a cool little example of the way that their two styles are very similar, but there are some key differences in them, even though they both have dark, macabre things. Now to the actual rating of the book. So I gave this a 5 out of 5 on my Goodreads, and I think that I would probably score it as a 4.5 out of 5, but I rounded up because I really enjoyed it. The difference is that when I read American Gods, by the time I got to the end, I felt like somebody smacked me in the face with brilliance. Like, it really, my brain was not the same after I read that. The beginning of the book, I was like, oh yeah, no, this is good. And then by the end, it was a whole nother thing, a whole experience. But for Neverwhere, it was more of just a fun story. I don't know that it was as ingenious, but it was a really good time. It was very well written, and I highly recommend it if you are interested in fantasy and the type of fantasy that is close to real life. You're not like in an elven realm or medieval times or whatever, but it's just a different look at the reality around us, and maybe there's more going on than what the average person experiences. Once again, I would like to thank my dear friend Alex for purchasing this for me, the illustrated version and the author's preferred text, and if any of you get a chance to read it, I recommend reading this version. So thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this video if you've read the book and how you felt about it. So remember to like, comment below, and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more videos such as this one. And I'll see you next time. Bye.